So, at the beginning of the year 2020, Nigeria's real GDP, or simply put, the economy, was projected to grow between 2 to 3%, depending on who you ask. And revenue projections seemed okay, although not the best, of course, with crude oil benchmark at $57, 2.1 million barrels per day. The budget was passed in record time, and we seemed ready to take on all the challenges, including revenue generation, infrastructure development, and ultimately lifting millions out of poverty. Yes, it was going to be challenging, but the government was confident until early this month when oil prices crashed to unprecedented lows of $30 per barrel and demand for our oil plummeted. No thanks to the coronavirus pandemic. And as though that was not enough, Nigeria began to record increasing cases of COVID-19. A month after, businesses are shutting down. Livelihoods are threatened. Millions of people are concerned. And to be honest, that's putting it mildly. It's a lot to wrap our heads around, but not to worry. We have someone to break all this down for us. So joining us this evening to seek to chart a course out of these woods of economic uncertainty is Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed. She joins us from our Abuja studio tonight. Good evening and thank you for joining us on the program.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for having me today.
Right. Now, you were like the first responder in some sense to this crisis when it started. I remember the president putting you in charge of a committee to see the effect of the coronavirus on the economy and the budgets. That's, I think it was around 9th of March. Few weeks after, how badly has our economy been hit by this pandemic?
Well, thank you very much. The Nigerian economy, just like other economies globally, has suffered significantly from the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent crash in crude oil price. This has meant that our economy's revenue is threatened and our ability to implement our budgets, both at the state and the federal level, is severely hampered. So what we did when the president put together the Crisis Management Committee is to take stock and make an assessment of how will this affect us. Globally, with all the impacts of the coronavirus, it is clear that global growth is going to decline significantly, and in worst case, the global growth might even go into recession. So Nigeria is not insulated from that. We made a review of the situation and determined that we need to scale back on our plans to bring our plans to current realities. For example, the crude oil price that we planned in the 2020 budget was at $57 per barrel. So we now had to scale back to $30 per barrel. But last week, we even found prices going as low as $22 per barrel. So we're still making an assessment to see whether we stop at 30 or we go to sub 30. But that means we will also need to reduce our expenditure. The president had directed that staff salaries and pensions and statutory transfers must be protected. That we must also ensure that key infrastructure projects such as major roads, railway lines, power that is critical to growth and development are also protected. Right. So we have been reviewing the budget to look at where we can defer expenditure to another period when things pick up. And the assessment we've done is we'll be able to to reduce the size of the budget by as much as 1.5 trillion. You recall that the budget is a 10 trillion budget. What we did is, working with NMPC, some of the upstream funded projects that are funded by the federation budget are being deferred or extended so that the delivery period is pushed forward. And that means that there will be more revenue that will be accruing to the federation account, the FAC, so that the states and the federal government have some relief as a result. We're also looking at our debt service obligations and talking to our lenders to renegotiate the repayment terms or even seek a stay, some kind of a stay of the debt service to preserve some of the revenue so that we can use them to meet the current national emergencies. All right. Honorable Minister, just a moment, if I may butt in now. We'll get into some of the measures being taken. But, there are some that are of the opinion that the government was slow
in reacting to the effect of the coronavirus. For them, they expected the government to take drastic measures even weeks ago. And it seemed as though the government was torn betwixt, protecting the economy and taking some of these very drastic measures. Now, why did it seem like that?
Well, our initial reaction is, first of all, to address the health issue. And the health issue is still the first priority for us. We have a healthcare system that needs to be upgraded, that is not capable of meeting the crisis if there is a large number of people that are affected. So our concentration was in how to contain the spread so that it doesn't break out to the point when our healthcare system is extremely stressed. We have provided interventions for the health sector to upgrade their ability to cope. We have released quite a number of, we have released resources to the National Center for Disease Control. We have released 10 billion to Lagos State government because it has been the epicenter as far as Nigeria is concerned. We've released about 6.5 billion to NCDC. We also have been able to access funding that is available from the World Bank that is already signed and effective, about 90 million US dollars. We've just made a request for extension of that by another 100 million US dollars. We've been trying to source funding to make sure we're able to quickly respond to the health emergency. But while we were doing that, we had also been making assessment on the impact of the economy. We have made reports to the Federal Executive Council. We have had consultations just this week, Wednesday, with the National Assembly on the various possible measures that we need to take. Remember that some of these measures will require approvals by the Federal Executive Council, as well as amendment of the MTEF, as well as the budget by the Parliament.
Okay, just before we go on a break, I'd like to ask you this question. Is the country financially buoyant at this point? Because, I mean, you talk about some of his interventions, and they involve a lot of funds. I'd like to know, and a lot of Nigerians want to know, in simple terms, is the country broke? But if you can hold your thoughts right now, because of our time, we'll quickly go on that break, and when we return, we'll get the minister to respond to that question, as well as some other recommendations that have been made. Should Nigerians be given some form of stipends to ensure that this period is easier on them? Stay with us.
So your question was whether we are broke. No, we're not broke. Are we buoyant? We're not buoyant as well. We have resources to manage, and we have been able to also find new sources of funds that we're able to realize very quickly to help Nigeria stay stable. What we want to do is to make sure that our growth is, even though it will decline, that it does not decline so badly that we struggle after the health crisis is managed. So while we're identifying resources, we're also prioritizing our spending, making sure that we select carefully where our limited resources go to, deferring expenditure that are absolutely not necessary now, and packing them up to later, and cutting costs where cost needs to be cut. For example, we're stopping all employment so that we don't grow our wage bill. As the president said, that must be protected. We have a number of fiscal incentives that we have thought through and that we have designed, and we have to do a couple of engagements before we announce them. Because of our fragile fiscal situation, we don't want to rush and make announcements of tax cuts or tax holidays without looking at the full picture of how it affects the federal government, how it affects states, and also how it affects even businesses. But
the question is
fiscal stimulus that will be a combination of
right.
deferring of taxes, reduction of some taxes, some waivers of import duties, especially for the healthcare industry, and also some of these things require amendment to some laws that we have to go to the Parliament for.
But the question usually is, how fast can the government move? Because from what we have seen about this pandemic, it moves even faster than a lot of people actually anticipate. So how fast can the government actually move to ensure that we stay ahead of this curve?
Well, what we're doing is to make sure that we're able to respond to the health crisis. Because if it gets out of hand, it has also a direct impact on the economy. And we have so far shown that the country is able to respond adequately to the health crisis. Healthcare facilities are being upgraded. We have found resources that we can put to also further upgrade. The president has set up a multi-sectoral committee that is chaired by the Secretary to Government of the Federation that has key MDAs as members and also some healthcare experts. They've designed a program and costed their program, and we now need to find the resources to provide these resources so that in every state of the Federation, there are major healthcare facilities that are upgraded to enable us respond to the health crisis.
I'd like to show you a recommendation.
If we don't respond adequately to the health crisis,
please land.
The impact on the economy will be worse. Okay,
I'd like to show you some recommendations by different individuals as to how this should be approached. And this is talking about earnings for people at the lower rung of the economic ladder. Now, this particular recommendation is from a former vice president of the country. If you could just have that. Now, he says that there should be some form of distribution of 10,000 naira to 30 million households as foodstuff supplements. And people are saying that, I mean, we could use BVNs since we have at least that amount. He also, advised that there should be provision of some form of airtime, 1,500 naira airtime to 100 million mobile phones for emergency calls and information, and of course, reduction in pump price, perhaps further reduction in petrol pump price. And for him, he feels that this can ensure that Nigerians go through this process in a much easier way. The question is that something the government is considering?
So we have a lot of these recommendations, a whole lot, because everybody has been coming through trying to help. But for each of such recommendations, we have to consider the consequences. For example, how do you get money to citizens? A lot of the poor and the vulnerable people are not in the banking system. How do you get money across to them to make sure that the right people are the ones that you're actually giving the money to? We have a social investment program that has been distributing money, but the coverage has been limited. So we're working with the National Social Investment Office, with the Humanitarian Ministry, to see how we can expand this process. We also have guidance that we can actually transfer money using the telephones, because there's about 186 million phone lines in Nigeria. Some people may have more than 2 phones, but we can use the telcos to make an assessment of the kind of spending that people have on the phone, and that suggests to you how well off a person is by the type of spending they have on their phone. And so we can do money transfers as well. But each of these things that you do, there are consequences. There are implications of doing them, and it's not something that you do by just, you have a thought and then you go and implement it. We have been doing a lot of consultations, a lot of professionals have been giving us advice, so we have a whole suite
so will the government
recommendations that we have to now select a few that will have the most impact for the poor and the vulnerable.
So the question now is, will the government be giving out the stipends to Nigerians in the coming days, maybe?
The government is looking at the possibility of giving out stipends, increasing the stipends that it is already giving out to the category of Nigerians that are classified as poor and vulnerable. Also, we are looking at categories of citizens that have been affected by the nature of their jobs by this pandemic. For example, airports are closed. So people that are having maybe taxi services at the airports, they will not be staying at home with nothing to do. People that are selling food, they will not be staying home and they have nothing to do. So we have to carefully identify the groups that will have these interventions. We are a population of 200 million people. If you don't select carefully, then you will not have the best impact for the limited resources that we have.
All right. So
and then also, we're not forgetting businesses.
Absolutely. So right now, there have been different projections about the country's economy in the light of the pandemic. But from your end, with the figures you're looking at, what do you see of the economy in the coming months? Some are saying that the economy will perhaps recede into some form of recession, and there have been other projections. But what do you see?
Fact is, we're going to struggle in terms of revenue. As long as the crude oil price is as low as 30 and sub 30, the federal and the state government will be struggling. And that's why we're frantically looking for alternative sources of funding in the form of budget support to support the economy towards the trying times. But we're hopeful also that this pandemic will be limited in time. So if it is an average of 3 months, we should be able to still close the year with a positive growth. But if it goes longer than that, 6 months, 1 year, we will go into recession.
Right. Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, we'd like to thank you so much. And we wish you the very best. And we hope, we definitely believe that Nigerians will support you in this venture. Well, that's our show for tonight, everyone. At least we've been able to shed some light on the economic projections for Nigeria at this very critical time. I'm Kayode Okikelu. Thank you so much for watching and have a fantastic weekend ahead.